September 11, 2001 was a day when the world changed forever. Living through those events, we can recall the horror as the news unfolded before our eyes. The terrible scenes on television are forever seared into our memories. The fear, uncertainty, as well as the unimaginable loss and pain our country and community lived through lingers with us even until today. We remember where we were when we heard the news. We were simultaneously devastated, yet awe-inspired by the bravery of our first responders. The following days and weeks, we mourned our lost loved ones with makeshift memorials and prayed for the rescue or recovery of the missing. We were angry, shocked, and heartbroken. 20 years have now passed, and time has a way of eroding memories. Distance from an event can make us feel disconnected, and a whole new generation has grown up since 9/11 occurred. However, the impact of 9/11 still resonates. On this, the 20th anniversary of September 11th, Clarkstown as a community chooses to remember and to create a new tribute to those we have lost. 5 short years ago, I was proud to stand here as we unveiled the newly rebuilt and more expansive memorial with 2 spouts of water to poignantly commemorate the Twin Towers and the fallen. While the memorial is a powerful reminder of those who were lost on that day, more is needed. Today we unveil a new type of memorial. This brief video will share a few remembrances, mainly from public sources, about the 26 lives that had ties to Clarkstown. What follows is by no means a definitive piece of history on these individuals. Rather, it is meant to capture a glimpse of their humanity to pass on to future generations, so that these 26 lives are not just names etched on a memorial. It is our solemn duty to remember these beloved members of our community. As our monument says, we will never forget. Please join us now as Clarkstown remembers her own. Thank you.
John Albert, 46, was a resident of Upper Nyack. He worked for Marsh & McLennan as a Vice President of Information Technology on the 96th floor of Tower 1. John was a warm, compassionate family man. He was deeply committed to the community. A huge baseball fan, John not only coached his 2 sons in the Nyack Valley Cottage Little League, but was also a board member of the league and a director of the International League Division. A Little League field was named in his honor. Alex Chang, 51, was born in Taiwan and lived in New City for over 2 decades. He was an information specialist for Marsh & McLennan. His family was never able to sleep in on weekends. Every Saturday morning he would sing hymns at the top of his voice from the kitchen. And if that didn't get the family out of bed, he would walk into each of their bedrooms singing. Alex Chang was a man of faith, and his family belonged to a non-denominational church in New Jersey. He was so respected in his church that more than 1,200 people attended his memorial service. Wells Remy Crowther, 24, was a resident of Upper Nyack. He worked for Sandler O'Neill and Partners as an equity trader on the 104th floor of the South Tower. At 16, Crowther joined his father as a volunteer firefighter. He graduated Nyack High School and attended Boston College, where he played lacrosse. First-hand accounts of Crowther's heroism were well documented, as he became known as the man in the red bandana. In the midst of the incredible chaos, he helped people to safety, administered first aid to the injured, and assisted in putting out fires. According to those he encountered that morning, he saved as many as 18 lives. I've known the Crowther family for more than 2 decades, and and I witnessed firsthand the man that he had become.
As a young boy, Wells was full of adventure, imagination. He loved G.I. Joes when he was very small, and he used to dress up in camouflage gear with his buddy from around the corner, and I would find them sometimes in the bushes or hanging from trees with their G.I. Joe, rifles at the ready. His friends would say we always knew that if Wells was with us, he would have our backs. He always stepped up. That was Wells.
Richard Cadena, 46, was a 20-year veteran of Wall Street and was working as a broker for Cantor Fitzgerald on September 11th. He was known to family and friends as the person who always stayed in touch, from impulsive phone calls to more elaborate get-togethers. He had an adventurous spirit and is remembered for his love of skiing, flying helicopters, and Jimmy Buffett. But mostly, he was known as the person who kept everyone laughing.
Thomas Dowd, 37, was a resident of New City. He worked at Cantor Fitzgerald as vice president for government bond trading. Those who knew Thomas Dowd will tell you it was very easy to know where you stood with him. If he liked you, he would insult you. He never changed who he was based on the people who he was with. Thomas would laugh at his own jokes harder than anyone. He also loved coaching basketball, which he did with a fury, pouring his time and emotion into 3 youth, neighborhood, and regional leagues. The time not spent with his 3 children, Heather, Tommy, and Brittany, was devoted to his childhood friends and the neighborhood, Inwood, in Upper Manhattan. Carl M. Flickinger, 38, was a resident of Congers. He worked at Cantor Fitzgerald as a convertible bonds trader. Carl Flickinger considered his work hours at Cantor Fitzgerald to be one of the job's biggest benefits. Though he started at 7 a.m., he was home by 6:30 p.m. with his family here in Congers. Every Saturday, he shopped for groceries before taking his 11-year-old twins to the mall for new sneakers or jeans. In the evening, he checked his son's homework and read to his 5-year-old daughter. Mr. Flickinger was also a gadget guy. He liked to buy the latest nifty devices as gifts for his friends. And every morning before his commute, he bought coffee at the Dairy Mart and left it for his wife. And at 11 a.m., he always called home just to touch base, just to tell Kathy how his morning was going. Thomas Foley, 32, was a resident of West Nyack and a decorated 11-year veteran of the FDNY. He spent his first 9 years with Engine 41 in the Bronx and the remainder of his career with the elite Rescue 3. Tommy was a star football player at Clarkstown South and longtime volunteer with the West Nyack Fire Department. He was an avid outdoorsman and sportsman who enjoyed hunting, fishing, and even skydiving. He continued his football career after college, playing for the FDNY Bravest football team, where he lined up alongside his brother Danny in the defensive backfield. Tommy's adventurous personality also led him to the world of rodeo, where he excelled as a bull rider. Tommy was a beloved son, brother, uncle, godfather, cousin, nephew, and friend. In his 32 years, Tommy lived each day to the fullest with unique generosity. He accomplished everything he set out and loved to do and always excelled through his efforts. Whether as a fireman, a cowboy, a friend, a neighbor, or an acquaintance, Tommy made an unforgettable impact on everyone he met.
He was something. He had a very crazy side, very wild side, loved a good time. We grew up in West Nyack, went to high school, Clarkstown South. We had a vacation home in Pine Bush. We had the greatest life, greatest parents.
Frederick Fred Gabler, 30, was a resident of New City. He worked at Cantor Fitzgerald as an equities trader. Fred's idea of heaven was to one day live surrounded by his friends on the same block, or perhaps in some suburban compound. Had Fred's dreams become reality, the compound would have needed some sizable acreage. More than 1,500 people attended his memorial service.
Udiver S. Jane, 52, was a resident of New City. He worked for Cantor Fitzgerald in the E-Speed division. He graduated from the University of Nebraska at Lincoln with a doctorate in chemical engineering. He also held a doctorate in computer science. He was his wife's dream. He did the grocery shopping and showered her with flowers and greeting cards on not-so-special days. And every night, he remembered to make her a cup of tea. Long after he finished his formal schooling, Yud continued to study and upgrade his skills, and his discipline rubbed off on his two daughters. After Yudvir's death, his family recalled missing hearing his typing at night. Beyond his quirky affection for his typewriter, his family fondly remembers his generous and loving personality. Eric Learfield, 32, was a resident of New City and a graduate of Clarkstown North High School. Eric was a director of business development at Random Walk Computing and was at a breakfast at Windows on the World on September 11th. A finance major at the Stern School of Business at New York University, he liked to dunk French fries in gravy, loved movies and the movie business, and Brooklyn Heights, where he, his wife Haley, and daughter Laura Elizabeth lived. His entire life, Eric was always crazy about comic books. Friends say he had the largest collection they had ever seen. According to Eric's wife, his perfect day would include a farmer's market, a big meal cooked at home, and reading comic books. Laura M. Longing was a Nanuet High School graduate, a resident of Pearl River, and vice president at Marsh USA. She worked on the 96th floor of the World Trade Center, North Tower, as a project manager in the IT department. At Nanuet High School, Laura played varsity soccer and softball. She received her bachelor's degree in management from Pace University and her master's degree in finance from Iona College. She made the very difficult task of being a successful businesswoman and loving wife and mother seem easy. An adoring mother of William and Brian, and loving wife and best friend to Chris, Laura was a guiding light to her family. Laura had a joy for life which will live on in her sons. She loved the outdoors, camping, and playing golf and softball. Mark Ludvigsen, 32, was born in Canada, but married into a well-known Rockland family and settled here. He was the vice president of the Bank and Municipal Bond Division at Keith, Bruyette, and Woods. Mark was a driving force behind the New York Athletic Club's rugby team. He was one of 3 members of the same firm who played on that team. Unfortunately, all 3 died in the attack. Mr. Ludvigsen not only carried his weight at a second-row position, but he formed a recruiting network in which he befriended players from around the world, helped them get visas, and find employment so they could pursue rugby in New York. Eric's wife, Maureen Kelly, says that everyone was drawn to him, both on and off the field. Following his death, messages poured in from around the world, from rugby players in Sydney, London, and elsewhere.
Joseph Marchbanks was a Nanuet resident, and he was a New York City Fire Department battalion chief. Marchbanks was coming off duty on September 11th. Instead of going home, he went down to the World Trade Center. Marchbanks was a 22-year veteran of the FDNY. He also coached his 13-year-old daughter's softball team and never missed a soccer game or baseball game for his 8-year-old son. At the beginning of his career, Marchbanks took the test for the FDNY and the NYPD. Both departments came back with offers on the same day. He chose a career as a firefighter and never looked back. The Joseph Marchbanks Jr. Scholarship Fund was started in 2004 to recognize a male and female athlete from the Nanuet High School. John Daniel Marshall, 35, a resident of Congress, was a New York City firefighter. Daniel usually was stationed in the Bronx with ladder 27 and engine 46. Even before Daniel became a firefighter, he was a hero. He was on the Garden State Parkway coming home from the shore, and he saw an elderly couple on the side of the road with their car on fire. He helped them get out of the car and assisted these people and saved their lives. That's just the kind of person Daniel was. A few months later, he joined the New York City Fire Department. He worked at Ladder Company 27 in the Bronx, near where his father had been a police officer, and did rotating duty at Engine Company 23 in Manhattan. Donald J. McIntyre, 38, New City resident, was a Port Authority police officer. Before the term became trendy, Donald was a multitasker. He had high energy and always had great intentions to help everyone. McIntyre, Port Authority police officer for 15 years. He was also a union trustee, someone who was never afraid to make waves. But around the house in New City, he was sort of a husband even the neighbors couldn't seem to get enough of. He shoveled driveways, ran errands, and played Mr. Fix-It. On the morning of September 11th, Donald was working at Newark Airport when he heard about the first plane hitting the Trade Center. He jumped on the PATH train and went to the towers. Brian Christopher Novotny, 33, born and raised in New City. He attended St. Augustine's and he played CYO basketball. Brian went on to Albertus Magnus High School. He played 3 sports. He was a star in all of them. From there, he attended Lemoyne College, where he played soccer. Brian worked at Cantor Fitzgerald, where he was a derivatives manager. Brian grew up in a large family and shared in the love and special bonding that only someone from a large family would understand. Brian's memory live on in golf outings and scholarships and the memorial garden at Albertus Magnus High School.
Vanessa Langer, 29, was an office manager at a company in the World Trade Center. Shortly after her first wedding anniversary with her husband Tim, Vanessa found out she was pregnant with the couple's first child. She was 4 months along on the morning of September 11th. According to her husband, Vanessa was fast and furious. She did not walk, she darted to everything that she did. She competed fiercely at computer games and the family football pools, and she always let out a scream when the Yankees or Giants scored. David Ortiz, 37, was a resident of Nanuet. He was a locksmith at the World Trade Center for the Port Authority. When not working overtime to help pay for the renovations to his home, he often would take his 14-year-old son fishing. He knew the ins and outs of the World Trade Center like the back of his hand. He went back to make sure people who were evacuating the 2 towers didn't end up going into the building at 4 World Trade Center, undoubtedly saving many lives in the process. He will be remembered for his love of fishing, motorcycles, and of course, his family. Kevin Riley, 45, lived in Pearl River, grew up in Spring Valley, and graduated from Albertus Magnus High School, class of 1991. He joined the New York City Fire Department in February of 2000 and was proud to be assigned to Ladder 40 in Harlem, the same firehouse where his father had served for 16 years. Riley was very athletic. He was a member of the FDNY softball team, earned a black belt in Taekwondo, and completed the 1998 New York City Marathon in 4 hours and 17 minutes. Kevin married the love of his life, Jennifer, 2 months prior to the attacks on September 11th. Vernon Allen Richard, 53, was a resident of Spring Valley and a captain in the New York City Fire Department with Tower Letter 7. Born in Brooklyn, he graduated in the top 10% of his class from Boys and Girls High School. Vernon was also part of the All City Choir. From 1967 to 1969, he served in the United States Army and spent 13 months in South Korea as a radio teletype communications sergeant. He was ordained a deacon of the First Baptist Church of Spring Valley and was advisor to its youth council. Vernon loved to run. He was a member of the New York Road Runners and the Rockland Road Runners Club and competed in 6 New York City marathons.
Joseph Roberto, 37, was a native of New City and was vice president and research analyst at Keefe, Boyett & Woods on the 89th floor of Tower 2. When Joseph first met his wife, Janet, he gave her a ride on the back of his motorcycle. Love blossomed on the back of that bike, as 3 years later, in May 1988, they were married. Joseph loved wildlife and took his young son to the Bronx Zoo 3 times while he was just a baby. And just 10 days before the attacks on September the 11th, his wife Janet told him he was going to be a father again. Joseph Roberto was a motorcycle enthusiast, a coin collector, and a Civil War buff. Robert W. Spear Jr., 30, was a resident of Valley Cottage. He served in the Army's 82nd Airborne and was a New York City firefighter with Engine Company number 50 and Ladder Company number 19. He grew up with 3 sisters, and when his father passed away, he was only 11. Robbie quickly became the man of the house, even though he was the youngest. Any one of his friends will tell you that Robbie was their best friend. He was the life of the party, the comedian, the daring one, and the one that you would turn to when you needed him the most. Robbie would be the first to say that all his dreams were coming true. He had a wonderful marriage to his wife Lorraine and a career that he loved. His family and his friends have said they have never seen him happier. Craig Staub, 30, was from Basking Ridge, New Jersey, but had ties to Rockland County and to Clarkstown. He was the senior vice president at Keith, Bruyette, and Woods. Craig was responsible for investing the company's money and never jumped into an investment without thoroughly doing his homework. He graduated summa cum laude from Boston University and made everyone feel comfortable upon meeting him. Blessed with many, many friends, Craig was a go-to guy for advice by all who knew him. He loved the outdoors and being active, traveled the world, and had recently built a new house to fill with 3 or 4 kids he and his wife planned to have. His daughter Juliet was born on his birthday just 11 days after he had perished on 9/11.
Stephen Weinberg, 41, was a resident of New City and enjoyed his position as an accounting manager at Thompson Financial Services, where he worked on the 70th floor of the South Tower at the World Trade Center. He was married to Lori and had 3 children. The couple celebrated their 14th wedding anniversary just 13 days before September 11th. Stephen was a proud Syracuse University graduate and was always wearing something from his alma mater. Years later, his son would follow in his footsteps at SU. His daughter Lindsay currently works at the New York City Medical Examiner's Office, the same office that had identified her father's remains in 2002. Michael Woolley, 34, grew up in New City and graduated from Clarkstown South and then SUNY Albany. He was hired by the Port Authority Police Department in 1993 and was assigned to the World Trade Center Path Station as an escort officer. Michael lived in Westwood, New Jersey with his wife Jennifer and 3 children. He enjoyed fishing and golf. According to his sister, he was like a Pied Piper for his children. The minute his car pulled into the driveway, he was surrounded by children, his own and others, always looking to be taken to the park.
David Terrence Woolley, 54, of Nanuet, was a captain and 31-year veteran of the New York City Fire Department, assigned to Engine 54 on the morning of September 11th. He is remembered as a devoted family man and hard worker. In his spare time, he turned a talent for wallpapering and painting into a profitable hobby and business, often working with his son, brother, and cousin. His warm demeanor was well known to his customers around Rockland County. Woolley was married to his wife Linda for 33 years. They had 2 children, and the pride and joy of his life was his grandson, Justin.
You know, 9/11 hasn't stopped. It continues to impact families with illness and death. And
keeping Wells's memory alive has been a saving grace for me. I have said, and I hope I'm not misunderstood, but as horrible as it is for all of us 9/11 family members, we have that piece, we have that story about Wells that gives us something positive to focus on. And so it's become a symbol. People really rally around this red bandana.
We as a family lost Tommy on 9/11, but we were impacted so much more than that, as were other families. So both Tommy and Danny were firefighters. Danny was out that day. He wasn't working. Tommy was working. Danny and my dad were down searching for my brother. My dad ended up with leukemia from being down in the pile, and Danny wound up with pancreatic cancer. And we lost both of them.
The red bandana. I've been asked why, what it means to me, what it means that this piece of cloth, what it means to me. Well, it meant a lot to Wells. I mean, I think in a way it was his connection to his father. It was connection, as he carried it, it was a connection to his youth, to his growing up. Maybe he sensed a power in it. Perhaps for me, it was the clue that unlocked the mystery of what happened to Wells that day. It's how I found him. The two witnesses, Judy Ween and Ling Young, referencing this mysterious man wearing a red bandana, calling out commands, helping people, putting out small fires, escorting them to safety. And I went, oh my God, Wells, I found you. I found you. So that's what the red bandana meant to me. And now to see how the red bandana has become a symbol of courage. And with that, Wells is changing the world with his red bandana.
On this 20th anniversary of 9/11, we remember all the victims of that terrible day and the suffering and sacrifice of those left behind. We also remember all the first responders, volunteers, and workers who spent hours, days, weeks, and months on the pile, many of whom we have lost from 9/11 illnesses, and even more who continue to suffer. This video and monument behind me will stand as a permanent reminder. We will never forget.